For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
Hello and welcome to the Gist on Strat News Global. Hi, I'm Surya Gangadharan, and this evening we are going to take a look at Ukraine. You guessed it right. In the context of Ukraine, in the context of the larger developments in Ukraine, we're going to take a look at what Germany has been doing. Now, why Germany? Because Germany is the powerhouse of the economic powerhouse of Europe, and it now seems to be taking on a visibly military profile. This is for the first time since World War II. So I have a small a graphic over here for you to get a sense of the direction I'm taking you. Basically, Germany has hiked its defense budget to around 100 billion euro. This happened in the course of the last couple of days. Earlier, it was around 53 billion euro. So that's a significant increase. Germany has said that it intends to maintain its defense spending at 2% of GDP from the current 1.4%. It is investing in aircraft that can carry nuclear weapons, and there are also plans to procure armed drones. These are on the basis of various reports.
Great to see you. Thank you for having me.
Dr. Narlikar, it seems that Germany is finally getting ready to throw off that defensive cloak it has worn around itself ever since World War II. So, does that make, is it because Ukraine is so important now to Germany?
So you're right. What we are seeing in Germany right now is indeed a Zeitenwende, an epochal shift. And we've seen it sort of within a few days, as you said in your preliminary comments, we have seen quite some very dramatic measures happening. So, for example, on just before the attack on Ukraine on the 24th of February, on the 22nd of February, Olaf Scholz, as a response to the provocations from the Russian President Vladimir Putin, he said that Germany was calling a halt to Nord Stream 2. This is something that his predecessor, Angela Merkel, had resisted quite strongly because of Germany's dependence on Russia on energy. Come the 24th of February and the outbreak of war between Russia and Ukraine, we see three big steps happening. So first, Olaf Scholz agreed to the inclusion of a ban on SWIFT transactions with Russia after some hesitation, but he agreed to it. Second, he in a very stirring speech at a special session of the German parliament, Scholz said that Germany will be supporting Ukraine. And in doing so, it will stand on the side of Europe, democracy, and the right side of history. And then he said, the Russian invasion marks a turning point. It is our duty to support Ukraine to the best of our ability in defending against Putin's invading army. And third, like you said, Germany has said that it will increase its NATO defense spending, perhaps even go beyond the expected 2%, which it has not met in the past. This is very significant. Why? What has prompted this? Why these dramatic changes? And Ukraine, I would say, has certainly catalyzed this Zeitenwende, this epochal shift, because Ukraine is a democracy. It's on Europe. It's come under attack. And what it has shown to Germany is that soft power on its own is sometimes not enough. You need to back it up with hard power. And if I may, just one insightful comment from the previous defense minister of Germany, Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer. This is what she tweeted. She tweeted, "I'm so angry at ourselves for our historical failure. We have forgotten the lesson that negotiation always comes first, that we have to be militarily strong enough to make non-negotiation not an option for the other side." So this is not just about Ukraine. right? This Ukraine has catalyzed this fundamental shift in German foreign policy.
So, what is the assessment in Germany as to the direction this conflict in Ukraine is going to go? We know the Russians are attacking, but just looking a little ahead, what is likely to happen in Ukraine?
Look, I'm a mere academic. I don't do crystal ball gazing. Um, you know as well as I do that there are talks ongoing between Russia and Ukraine. Right now, I don't see any obvious middle ground. If a middle ground emerges, great. But until then, we are seeing the Ukrainian people putting up a very brave fight, and that is what I expect them to do. Until if there is a middle ground emerging, that would be good, right? But given the attack that it is facing right now and where negotiations are right now, I can't say that I expect this conflict to stop right away.
So, Germany has a transition from sending helmets to missiles and rocket launchers and so on. What other forms of, what is the buzz in Germany about the kind of material assistance that they are prepared to give Ukraine?
So there is there this is a very major shift in German foreign policy. So people, because of Germany's difficult history with the past, are of course wary of. They have always been wary of military types of assistance, and
Yeah.
you also see this caution right now. So you see different aspects of this debate playing out with some people. The most overwhelming message in Germany, you said, what's the vibe, right? What's the main buzz? And the buzz is there is extreme concern about a European country being attacked by Russia, right? And there is concern about what this means not only for Europe, but the global balance of power. Within that framework, you hear different voices. So, of course, there are people who are concerned about this epochal shift that we're seeing. There are others who welcome it. There is recognition overall that whatever steps that Germany takes towards updating its military, towards increasing its NATO contributions, there is agreement, there is recognition, there is understanding in society and with the government that this will take place within the democratic framework, right? And Germany will not go it alone. Germany sees itself as a very committed member of the EU. It sees itself as a committed member of NATO. And whatever it does, it will not go it alone. It will work closely within the institutions that it is embedded in.
So, will Germany, is it prepared to play a leadership role in that sense? In getting the team together and, giving direction, giving it that kind of push that it needs?
Again, for obvious reasons, Germany has always been careful to take on the role of a leader. But there is no question that Germany is a very important, a key player, for example, in the European Union. And perhaps it's no coincidence that on Sunday, we saw two very important announcements. We saw the announcement by the German Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, about the help that it would be providing, Germany would be providing to Ukraine, about the increase in the NATO budget from Germany, about the revamping of its own military. But we also saw this announcement, a very interesting announcement coming out of Europe from Ursula von der Leyen, an unprecedented decision that the EU would purchase weapons for Ukraine, right? So this is not Germany pushing anything on the European agenda, but the fact that Germany takes on a clear position can also help shape the European agenda. And that's how I see German role, right? I don't see it as proactively claiming the role of leader, but I do expect it to lead with example, right? So when Olaf Scholz expresses commitment to the Ukrainian people, then that has an effect in Europe. It has an effect in NATO.
Is there a larger concern that this whole thing in Ukraine could spiral out of control? Is that the larger concern here in the German political establishment?
Yes, very much so. Because, well, for two reasons. One, we have seen the breakdown of that frantic diplomacy that was taking place,
Yeah.
right, in the run up to the 24th of February. So soft power didn't work, diplomacy on its own didn't work. A month ago, I mean, people have been warning of this for years now. But the fact that the amount of surprise that we saw on social media, for example, on the events of the 24th of February and the continuing events that we are seeing, right, shows that diplomacy didn't work. There has been an escalation, right? We've been seeing this escalation happening in Ukraine. So there is awareness, there is concern about how this could spill over. Yes, very much Ukraine, beyond Ukraine. But I would also say we have to keep an eye on the global picture. So we're seeing this conflict happening, this war happening in Europe, which many people thought was unthinkable, right? After the terrible experiences that Europe has witnessed. But it's important that we don't lose an eye on the global stage. And that global stage, of course, is also China, right? That includes China. It includes the Indo-Pacific. It includes a country like Taiwan, right? And what might happen there. And so there is awareness about escalation potential in Germany in the context of Ukraine and Europe. What I think is really important that our leaders in Europe, also in the US, do not lose sight of is the global balance of power and the fact that the risks that China poses have not gone away.
So, which brings me to my next question, that if this conflict drags on, there is every likelihood that the US could be dragged in, perhaps distracted or diverted from the Indo Pacific.
And so your question is?
The question is the likelihood of this, if this conflict drags on, could the US be, in that sense, diverted from its focus on China and then, get drawn back into Europe to helping its European allies and NATO? That danger exists, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. I mean, it would be very short-sighted for that to happen, right? Because what the Europeans should really try and avoid, and what the US should try and avoid, and what India should try and avoid, is a group of authoritarian states gathering together and posing a fundamental challenge, not only geopolitically, but to democratic values, right? So there is very much the risk that you mentioned. And so what I would hope is politicians, policymakers, keep their eye on the world stage, because what is happening in Ukraine and what is happening in Russia need not only stay in that part of the world or even this part of the world, which is Europe.
So when President Putin, sorry, please go on.
So what I would say is that the US and the EU should be actually reaching out to India, right? India has, I was disappointed that India did not vote in the way that it could have voted, but I understand the extreme geopolitical pressure that India is also in. So what I would say is that the US and the EU really should be reaching out to India as a democracy to be standing up for democratic values, but also providing assistance to India, right? So also showing that they're keeping an eye on China, rather than saying, follow our follow. A colleague of mine tweeted yesterday, from ORF tweeted yesterday, the West seems to be saying, why don't you follow our values while we follow our interests, right? That's the message that Indians are often taking away. And the way to get India engaged on this is not to constantly blame it, but to get to work with it on democratic principles so that India does not find itself in this extremely difficult bind of having Russia as an ally, having dependence on Russia for weapons supplies, and China on its borders, making the moves that it has been making.
So, what was the reaction in Germany when President Putin ordered his nukes to be put in some kind of readiness? I mean, what was the reaction?
Extreme concern, right? And I would say, at least, I mean, I can't sort of speak on behalf of all the German population, obviously, but at least amongst a good part of the policy making community, that recognition that soft power is not enough. You do need hard power. And in that sense, for me as an analyst, that action by President Putin only further vindicates the decision by Olaf Scholz, the announcement by Olaf Scholz, right? That Germany should be paying a lot more attention to strengthening its army, to updating its army, to upgrading all its military forces so that it can defend the country and help defend the continent and ideally the democratic world.
How is this a decision to rearm, to hike the defense budget? How is it playing out in the mass media, in the public domain? How are people reacting to it?
Like I said earlier, of course, there are people who will always be concerned about. There used to be a saying, a German hand should never touch a rifle, right?
Mm-hmm.
There is this is a very understandable and strong, still surviving sentiment from Germany's history, right?
Yeah.
But side by side, there is the recognition that if you want peace, you need to be able to back up your negotiations with military prowess. That quotation that I just gave you, that from the previous defense minister, Anna Great Karrenbauer, right? That negotiation is great, but you do need to be militarily strong enough to make non-negotiation not an option for the other side. So Germany, you can feel this, right? People recognize the risks, the extreme dangers, the suffering that Ukrainians are going through, how diplomacy on its own did not suffice. And yet there is this history. So whatever will happen in Germany, it will happen under very tight bounds, close, a very close eye on democratic institutions, right? Everything will happen. Germany is a country where you have deliberative democracy. So these big changes happening in a couple of days are understandable, but people are really thinking them through. There is, and you feel this, right? You see this in the debates. You see this in social media, within the context of a neighbor, a democratic power being under attack, right? That's shaping it. That's shaping the debate.
No, there is a view, that the US perhaps misled Ukraine into thinking that they will provide help and support if they pressed ahead with their moves to decouple, disengage from Russia, join NATO, all that stuff that went on.
Did the US mislead Ukraine on this? This is going to take me really too long to get into, but I will say, if you like, you can use this part as a cut, if you like, which is that I don't think we were helped by the fact that the US was making public announcements on how Putin is going to attack on this day, Putin is going to attack on this day, right? Because that is vital information, and that is information that needed to be shared with allies. But all this kind of very public declarations of the anticipation of war, for me, looks like it's almost a little bit like warmongering. It's not going to have a deterrent effect. If you tell an authoritarian leader, we know you're going to attack, we know you're going to attack, that's not actually going to help the cause of peace. So I don't think this was terribly well handled. The run-up was not very well handled by the US, is what I will say.
On that
Okay.
note, Dr. Narlikar, thank you very much for your time. Pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye. So for those of you who have been following us, following this conversation, thank you for your comments and observations. Do subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on social media, Instagram and Twitter. Thank you very much. Good night.